The PS5 Pro presentation just finished up like a minute ago, and I just wanted to go over some of my immediate reactions to what we just saw, specifically right at the end of it that Sony went past in just a few seconds. But we should see press releases, and they'll have a PlayStation blog post go up here pretty soon. I'll go over all those fine details tomorrow in Newswave, but for the most part, what we saw here, I think, shocked a lot of people. And it wasn't necessarily about the capabilities of the PS5 Pro, it was how much it's going to cost to get one. And well, I guess we'll go over that here today. So guys, enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. And if you missed this morning's Newswave earlier, I would check it out. There was more stuff than just the PS5 Pro build-up in there. But this was indeed about 9 minutes long. The countdown was technically longer than the pre-recorded presentation from Mark Cerny. It wasn't a situation of him standing up in front of people at a podium, doing some kind of lecture for an hour. Now, this was much more straightforward. Like, they cut it up so it was quick, concise, to the point. And to be honest, there wasn't as much to really go over. Like, I think people went into this, kind of myself included, thinking there would be more of an aha moment of, okay, I understand why they are necessarily doing this. And they did at least give a reason for it. I just don't know if it's a reason that is necessarily selling this box at that price. Nonetheless, though, if people are curious, I will be picking this up because I want to do a teardown of this thing. I'm very interested to see what they changed inside to accommodate the larger GPU and the setup in what looks to be a very similar sized box. And obviously, we'll be checking it out in terms of games and stuff. But I had the PS4 Pro. I did like the jump from the regular PS4 to the Pro because 4K was then enabled and you got better performance in many different games where there was no performance mode at times in the base PS4, and then with the PS4 Pro, there was. However, with the PS5, we have fidelity and performance mode. Now, could the PS5 Pro all of a sudden have a performance mode become toggleable and you can turn it on? Sure. But in this case, he did talk about, the Mark Cerny, that when the option is presented, 75% of people right now on the PS5 choose performance, which is interesting because it kind of feels like a lot of these games are developed the opposite way. Like, most games have performance mode as just make it as whatever, chop it down as much as possible to get 60 FPS. Who really cares? And at times we've had performance mode come out looking very, very blurry with something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And it seems like they were more focused in on fidelity mode despite these kind of statistics. It seems strange, but they did spend, I mean, honestly, a couple of minutes there at the beginning just talking about the current PS5, really lining it up for what the jump would be. And then Mark Cerny divided it into three different categories, three different components: the larger GPU, advanced ray tracing, and PSSR, which is like their spectral super resolution AI upscaling in the console, which apparently there is a chip specifically tasked to take care of that. So again, in a teardown, we'll find out more about that, I'm sure. And Sony typically will do their own teardown, but I would like to see some teardowns from independent sources. We'll see. And then, of course, testing from a Digital Foundry. But went over the larger GPU, 45% faster rendering, and then they started doing comparisons, which it makes sense to compare it to current games, but I gotta tell you, the issue we run into with this stuff now is you have to zoom in very far most times to get an indication of something like they showed Last of Us Part 2, and they showed the fidelity mode. Well, that's easier to see technically because it's 30 versus 60. It's like, hey, you can just do fidelity mode at 60 FPS here on the PS5 Pro without any real issues. And to me, that is a sizable benefit for a game like that you want to be more responsive in general with shooting and everything there. But when they showed off performance mode versus performance mode, it was very difficult to tell the difference when you're watching it through a compressed YouTube stream. Now, we should see them just upload comparisons just on YouTube outright in 4K, and those being higher quality will be easier to see the difference. But we are to a position now of diminishing returns where it's not necessarily going to be something that jumps out to the mainstream consumer like we've seen in the past, going from PS1 to PS2, PS2 to PS3, even PS3 to PS4. You could notice differences, like obvious ones. Here, though, the Pro console, which the PS4 Pro from the PS4 was obvious, you get 4K. just not as much of a benefit here as we've seen in the past. Spider-Man 2, same deal. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Horizon Forbidden West, they did lean on a lot of their first-party stuff to kind of showcase the differences. One that I think is at least sizable is Gran Turismo 7, because ray tracing is enabled in gameplay. Before, you would get ray tracing, I believe, during replays, and yeah, it looked better, but you really couldn't benefit from that when you're actually playing the game itself. So here, at least, that's something, I guess, that's a toggle that you can turn on and off. Hogwarts Legacy, same deal, gets ray tracing, and apparently casting shadows just looks better. So the games themselves will just look better. That is, I think, what most of us went into this expecting, but there were some, like, crazy rumors going into it where people online were talking about how there's going to be full backwards compatibility for this thing, and I don't really know where that came from or why that would be correlated to a pro console that would just be a stronger system. Like, we already had heard that the CPU was going to be relatively the same or comparable, maybe a little faster, but it wasn't going to be some massive leap to where, sure, the system is capable enough to handle PS3 emulation, everything, without any real issues in optimization, right? That's not the case. So when I look at this, and they did show the system, it was, of course, the three stripes like sketch that we saw before, that lined up perfectly here. And really, it looks like a current PS5, one you already have, just with the stripes on the side, and apparently it's just a little bit thicker, which, okay, sure, they probably need more in terms of cooling for a heatsink and that sort of thing, so there just needs to be more space in general. And I'll take a look over, like I said, the press release and the blog post later on to get more information as to maybe some smaller details, little additions here and there that they decide to tell us in the writing. But looking at this now, when they went to flash the card at the end and it came up $700, it wasn't just me. There was sticker shock everywhere. I saw it and I was like, oh, that is more than I thought it would be, because, of course, it's just digital. If you want the disk drive, guess what? This system is $780. It's interesting that Sony is going the route of just a digital system, by the way. I'm sure in their mind they wanted to avoid the $780 price tag, or maybe they could have gone $750. Because if you look at the digital versus disc-based system for the PS5, it's a $50 difference. I guess they could have gone $700 and $750 here, but clearly they did not want to put a 7 in front of that price point, even though it's basically there. It's off by a penny. After tax, you're over it. In Japan, if you do the conversion from yen, it's about $840. You need the disk drive, it's a $900 system. That is where we are with consoles, which is kind of, I think, blowing my mind and many other people, because in 2016, when the PS4 Pro was unveiled, it was just $400. The base PS4 went down $100 in price to $300, and we got the Slim. We have almost gone up 100% in terms of price point in just 8 years for the Pro system. And I don't really know how the market is necessarily going to respond to this. I feel like the system will sell out immediately. Like, I think most of the enthusiasts are already on board. They're like, yep, that's great. That's going to line up nicely with my $3,000 TV or something. And you'll have, I'm sure some people will be kind of curious about it, or maybe don't have a PS5 yet. And they're like, well, this is it. This is my entry into the ecosystem now. This is PS5 Pro. But I do think this is a system that is going to have a worse sales ratio than the PS4 Pro pretty easily. Like, the PS4 Pro, I believe, was 1 in 5. That's not bad for a system that is more expensive, and there are many people in the mainstream who are just fine with the base system. And I think that's important to realize here. The current PS5 is not being discontinued. It will still be up for sale, and Sony has no problem selling that instead. I do just wonder, like, what the point is of this system to be pushed like this and put out there at this price point. It just seems kind of weird, because I don't see the kind of benefit that we had with the PS4 Pro just enabling 4K. If there was some other big thing here with AI, upscaling AI more meaningfully, then I would look at it and go, well, okay, that makes sense, but it just doesn't seem like there's that kind of pull like I saw with the PS4 Pro. But I guess the free market will decide. It seems like Sony's stock, apparently, based on what people are putting up there now, as soon as this was just announced, looks like it's already spiking, jumping up, because it's a more expensive product, which means you're going to generate more revenue. But I don't know. It's not the fact that enthusiasts right now are getting sticker shock. Makes me wonder what the mainstream thinks about this. And I feel like most of them are just like, hey, that's cool. I don't really need it. And then that's kind of it. But let me know what you guys thought about this one, because it's a digital only system. That's just how it's being packaged. I gotta tell you, I'm looking at this thinking, ooh, Sony. I feel like they're on board for maybe digital only for next gen at this point, because that was a little surprising that they didn't think to even have a disc-based unit for this. That tells you what they think of the enthusiast market right now, and maybe where they are skewing in terms of in terms of like the physical market. They made this system to, I guess, solve the performance fidelity issue, because the performance mode is affecting the quality of the image, because 3/4 of the people out there are picking performance. So when it's digital only, what does that mean about the people who are majority picking performance for fidelity? Yeah, that makes me think that they also are just going all digital, and maybe Sony is working to expedite that a little bit here, since they're about halfway to their next generation technically with the PlayStation 6. But let me know what you guys think about all this down below, and check out Newswave tomorrow morning, where we do a full breakdown of the PS5 Pro with the press releases, everything going around. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.